Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. This is going to be episode 8 of my New Jerusalem playlist. In the last episode, we went over the original plans for the city of New Jerusalem, and here they are. This was the original plan. A couple months later, there was a revision made, and there were some pretty significant changes. As far as I know, this is still the plan today. I haven't seen anything to suggest otherwise. If we were going to build New Jerusalem, the actual city today, it seems like it would follow this pattern. At the very least, where the temples are supposed to go. And we're going to cover that in future videos. A lot of our information about the temples come from Alvin R. Dyer, who was a member of the First Presidency. And currently, this building right here, or this temple, temple number 13, is what would correspond to the Visitor Center today in Independence, Missouri. The main temple was supposed to be right here. Unfortunately, it's in the possession of another church, the Church of Christ Temple Lot. And then the Community of Christ with these larger buildings, their temple and the auditorium, that also occupies land that would be part of the 24 temple complex. But at the very least, we have the Visitor Center. It was built to be one of the temples, but like I said, we'll cover that in another video. And so, you notice pretty big differences between the two, okay? So this is how it was oriented before. You had these three main blocks in the middle. You had the 24 temple complex. One block was north of the other block, 12 temples on each block. And then there was this block up here that was supposed to be for the bishop's storehouse. Well, in the revised city plat, there isn't a block for the bishop's storehouse. And now, instead of north and south, it's east and west when it comes to the two blocks that would have the temples. So pretty significant changes. You'll also notice that in the original plan, you didn't have names of the streets, but in the revised plan, you do. And so the way that it goes is that this street immediately south, I guess like if we were thinking of Salt Lake City, this would be like South Temple. But for the New Jerusalem, this street would be Jerusalem Street. The street to the north, which would be the equivalent of North Temple in Salt Lake City, is Zion Street. The one in the middle is Chapel Street. This one over here to, to the east is Kirtland Street. And then the one on the west is Bethlehem Street. And then from there, all the rest of the streets are numbered, 1st Street, 2nd Street, and so on. So again, as far as I know, this is still the plan, and this will come into fruition someday. At the very least, right now, we have a temple in waiting in the Independence Visitor Center. Okay, so what we're going to do is, just like the previous episode, we're going to read through this historical introduction for more details and further compare the two plans. And then in future episodes, we'll talk more about the temples. Likewise, there was an original design for the temples, and then there was a revised design, and we'll go over that as well. Okay, so this is the revised plat of the city of Zion, circa early August 1833. And we all know that it was shortly after this that the Saints were actually expelled from Jackson County. So anyway, in late June 1833, Frederick G. Williams drew a plat map with detailed explanations for laying out the city of Zion in Jackson County, Missouri. So that's in reference to this one, the first plan. Okay. The presidency of the high priesthood sent the plat with an architectural plan for the Missouri House of the Lord and a letter to the Church of Christ leadership in Jackson County. The package arrived on the 29th of July, 1833. The letter accompanying the plat instructed Missouri Bishop Edward Partridge and other church leaders that, quote, should you not understand the explanations sent with the drafts, you will inform us, so as you may have a proper understanding. For it is meet that all things should be done according to the pattern, end quote. Now, we know that a lot of things when it comes to the city was received by revelation. including the temples themselves. We know that the temples, the dimensions for the temples were received by Revelation, and those dimensions were followed when it comes to the Independence Visitor Center. You'll notice when you look at the Independence Visitor Center and compare it to the temple lot, which would have been the first temple, that the sizes are essentially the same. Okay, and that's because they followed Joseph Smith's dimensions that were revealed to him. Okay, by August 1833, having drawn a new plat for Kirtland, Ohio, the presidency of the high priesthood apparently saw errors in the pattern for the city of Zion and commissioned Williams to draw a revised plat featured here, as well as a revised plan for the Missouri House of the Lord. And just in case you didn't watch the other videos, essentially the temples would have looked very much like the Kirtland Temple in Kirtland, Ohio. So here's like a floor plan. You can see the different podiums for the different offices of the priesthood, right? You go to the next page, and it shows you the front view, okay, just like the Kirtland Temple, and then the side view. So presumably all 24 temples in New Jerusalem would have looked like this. There'd probably be some variations because they would have different functions, but I'm assuming that they would all pretty much look like that. Okay. Okay. Oliver Cowdery, who had been in Missouri but had left before the original plat and architectural plan arrived, offered the only surviving explanation for the creation of the revised plat and plan. In a remark inscribed on the revised plan of the Missouri House of the Lord, Cowdery stated, quote, "Those patterns previously sent you per mail by our brethren were incorrect in some respects, being drawn in great haste. They have therefore drawn these, which are correct. The form of the city is also incorrect, being drawn in haste. We send you another." End quote. The revisions to the plat reflect an evolution in Mormon city planning, offering more precision in some substantial changes, though the dominance and centrality of religious structures, which was a unique element in American urban planning, remain the same, right? Because, I mean, look, right in the middle of the city, you got the 24 temples. And if we look at Salt Lake City today, that city is laid out according to the Salt Lake Temple. There's a coordinate system that's followed in Salt Lake City. Excuse me. Let's go over there really quick. In fact, there's papers, or there's at least one paper that I know of that's been written that compares the layout of Salt Lake City to Kirtland, and what Brigham Young was trying to do was similar to what they did in Kirtland and what they had planned for New Jerusalem. But you can see here, you have these city blocks and they're nice and square. And then, you have all the streets that are at right angles to each other. And, plans changed over time. Salt Lake City turned into the monstrous thing that it is today. But one thing that's pretty unique about Salt Lake City is that it's very, very grid-like. You go to other major cities, they do have the concept of, streets north and south and west and east. But in Salt Lake City, it's so much so that the streets themselves, a lot of them don't even have names. They're just numbers. Let me turn on roads. So, for example, you have 1700 south, 300 east, 400 east, 2100 south, so on and so forth. Right? They don't even get names. You do have some streets that have names, like you have State Street, and like I said earlier, South Temple, North Temple. You have Main Street, but for the most part, all the main streets, they mostly have just number designations, with just a few exceptions. And then smaller streets inside neighborhoods, those usually have names rather than numbers. Here you have Welby Avenue. But anyway, okay. Unlike the earlier version, the revised plat of the city of Zion contained no detailed written explanations. The revised plat was drawn to cover a larger area than the original 1.5 square miles compared to the original 1 square mile. Okay. Now remember, this is one evidence that it was never the intention for the entire church to live inside the city limits of New Jerusalem. That's a misconception that some people have. We've already covered it. I think it was in episode 3 and 4. Will the whole church gather to Jackson County? The answer is no, they will not. So remember, we learned in the previous episode that the city was just going to contain somewhere between 15 to 20,000 people. That was it. And then once it was all filled up, a new city would be built after the same pattern, and it would just continue like that. Okay, so this one, larger. Okay, let's compare the two. And you can see, you can just, roughly see it is larger. Okay. Rather than 42 10-acre blocks and 7 15-acre blocks, so that's what that's referring to, is you had these 7 in the middle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These would be 15 acres. The rest of them would be 10 acres. Okay. So instead of that, this plat has 132 10-acre blocks. Increasing the plat size to 1.5 square miles meant the addition of 1,624 lots, bringing the total number of lots from 976 up to 2,600, which would have more realistically accommodated the original projected city population of 15 to 20,000 by decreasing the per dwelling occupation rate from an unrealistic 15 to 20 persons to a more reasonable 6 to 8. So yeah, that is more reasonable. That's more like some of our families nowadays. But I don't know. I mean, back then, I don't know what the average family size was, but 20, that even for back then, that would be on the higher end, I think. But anyway, so they had to fix it so that you could fit that many people in there without everybody being really crammed in into each lot. Okay. Revisions to the city center were also made. The 2 central blocks, each containing 12 temples, remained the central focus of the city, but they were reduced from 15 to 10 acres. Yeah, you can see that the blocks, the new blocks for the temples, are the same size as any other of the city blocks. Whereas with the old one, you could tell, I mean, it's just visibly larger because it was larger. This is going to be 15 acres instead of the 10 that the rest of the city would have. Okay. Each temple block retained the configuration of 4 temples across and 3 down. The revised plat, however, omitted a 3rd central block. That was to contain the bishop's storehouses. With the exception of the 2 central blocks, each of the remaining 130 blocks contains 20 half-acre lots. Lot numbering begins with the block in the northwest corner, the map being oriented with north at the top. And by the way, in case you're confused, I had to reorient this one. When you first pull this up, it has east at the top. Okay, here you have east right here. So I did it so you can see the difference with both of them having north at the top. Okay, so anyway, moves to the block south and then continues column by column in the same manner, moving east. Okay, it's just talking about the numbering of the lots. You see how they all have these different numbers. That's all that's talking about. This revised plat is the first known Mormon city planning map to include street names. The original plat called for 16 132-foot wide streets, while this revised version had 4 132-foot wide streets, all of which border the 2 temple blocks, and 21 82.5-foot wide streets. Yeah, you see that. You see how let me see. Let me make sure I understand. It looks like these streets right here are not as wide as like this right here. Like Zion Street is wider than First Street and Second Street and so on. So is Jerusalem Street. So is Bethlehem and Kirtland Street. You can kind of make that out when you zoom out. Okay, 13 streets run north to south, and 12 run west to east. 5 streets border the central temple blocks. Zion Street, located north of the temple blocks, Jerusalem Street to the south, Bethlehem Street to the west, Kirtland Street to the east, and Chapel Street, which runs north and south between the 2 blocks. All of the other streets have names that feature an ordinal number and a cardinal direction. The street numbers increase as they radiate out from the temple blocks in each direction. Yeah, just like Salt Lake. For instance, the first numbered street east of the temple block is named First Street East. Before receiving the revised plans, Partridge wrote to Williams on the 13th of August with some questions concerning the original plat in the plan for the house of the Lord. His letter arrived in Kirtland in early September after Williams had revised the plat. Joseph Smith responded to Partridge via a 4th of September letter to Vienna Jacques, I don't know, acknowledging receiving the letter and stating that the, quote, brethren whom we have recently sent to Zion will give them all the information they need about it, end quote. Sometime after the 18th of August and before the 4th of September, Orson Hyde and John Gould, following instructions from Joseph Smith, left Kirtland for Jackson County with letters, the revised plat of the city of Zion, and the revised architectural plans for the house of the Lord. They arrived in Jackson County in late September. When these latest plans arrived in Missouri, Bishop Partridge saw a need for further saw a need to further revise the arrangement of the temples in the 2 central blocks. He drafted revisions by late September 1833. In November, renewed violence in Jackson County, which culminated in the expulsion of church members, derailed any immediate plans to build the city of Zion in accordance with any of the revised patterns. The following transcript presents a note by Williams first, the cardinal directions second, and the street names third. The text found in the city blocks is then transcribed 1 block at a time. The first block transcribed is the one in the upper left corner of the plat, which is the northwest corner. The transcript continues down that column and then proceeds from column to column, moving from top to bottom and left to right. 2 blocks contain inscriptions of buildings. The rest of the blocks contain only lot numbers. And instead of indicating each lot number individually for these blocks, the transcript presents the span of lot numbers found in each block in square brackets. The image of this transcript is oriented north side up. We already knew that. So those are the details. Again, I think for me, the biggest thing is how the temples have been reoriented from what they were going to be. And just as a quick recap, I have this spreadsheet where I have the names of the temples. They apparently they're like in sets of 3. So each 3 has a name, and they all seem to correspond with offices of the priesthood. So over on this side, okay, and when I say this side, that's according to the revised plan. The ones on the east would be the ones for the Aaronic priesthood. So these last 3 right here those are called House of the Lord for the deacons in Zion, helps in government. The ones right here, if you go to the east, House of the Lord for the teachers in Zion. And so you see there's like this, you go from lower priesthood offices to higher. So the highest would be over here for the Aaronic priesthood. And then likewise, you'd have the same thing for the Melchizedek priesthood with the temples for the elders on the very far west side. And then the main temples would be these ones right here, numbers 10, 11, and 12. And they have the longest name. House of the Lord for the presidency of the high and most holy priesthood after the order of Melchizedek, which was after the order of the Son of God, upon Mount Zion, city of the New Jerusalem. And so presumably temple number 11 would have been the main temple in the first one built. And so when we look at Independence, Missouri today, let's see, let's go back there. We'll just do it like this. There we go. You can see the outline of that first temple. Let me turn off roads to make it easier. You can see the outline of that first temple. You can see where the cornerstones were laid. You can go inside if there's somebody there. They have this like tiny little kind of like foyer, but they also use it as like a visitor center where you can see cornerstones and stuff like that in there in a glass case. But anyway, you can see this rectangle right here, right? And it's oriented east and west. Whereas, well, actually, I'm not sure. Let me look at this. On here, it doesn't show how the temples would have been oriented, but I would assume that they would also be east and west. And I don't know if like these top ones would have been the Melchizedek priesthood and the bottom ones would have been the Aaronic. I think it probably says in the details in the actual transcript, but for right now, let's just look at this. So this one right here, temple number 11, that would be this right here. And so temple number 13, and like I said, we'll get into the details of this in a future video, but Alvin R. Dyer was tasked with figuring out which temple that would be. And so you can see here, you have this road that goes down the middle, and that works out pretty good with today. You do have a road that goes right here in front of what the first temple would have been. And so let's just pretend that this is the road that's used in the future. Maybe they'll widen it a little bit. I don't know. But here's the road. And so if you go directly across, right, that's where the Community of Christ temple is. But if you go across and then down, you come to number 13. So you go across and then down. And so that would be this one right here, which, like I said earlier, is the same size and it's oriented the same way. And it's just, it's a temple in waiting. And so, in fact, number 13, that would be one of the temples for the deacons. House of the Lord for the deacons in Zion, helps in government. And this is exactly what they're called. You can find the names on this first one right here. Let me zoom out. If you go, let's close the historical introduction. We're on page 1. If you go over to page 2, it'll show you the back. And then there's the transcription right here. And you can see all the names and in the numbers. So let's look at that right now. So temples, let's see, the names of the temples to be built, 10, 11, and 12 are to be called the House of the Lord of the Presidency of the High. Okay, so let's go back here. So 10 through 12, that would be the main temples. Oops, I got to reorient this again. There's east, turn it. Okay, so here's 10 through 12. So when it was oriented this way, the main temple would have been over here. So that's pretty different from this. And this way I think makes more sense because it's kind of like, it's like the central temple and it's facing east because presumably all these faced east, and that's why they drew it this way on this this plan. So yeah. Okay, so really neat stuff. At some point, this land will come back into the possession of the church, and I would assume that they would go ahead and get rid of all this and then build the city the way it was meant to be built whenever that time comes. So you'll have more temples probably over here, a couple like this, and then going like that, something like that. In fact, let's do just a little. Oops, let's do a little exercise really quick. Okay, so this is north and south, and I'll draw a polygon, and I'm just going to estimate it. So polygon, so okay, so it's probably going to be something like this. Let's see, there's the center point, so probably about like that. Oops, I messed up. Anyway, something like that, you know, and then you would probably still keep this road in the middle, and then you'd build new roads that would go around here. It would take a lot of work. You can see there's already a city there. Maybe they'll adapt to the city that's already there and just kind of make that central square, but leave everything else alone. I don't know. You can see that everything else is pretty grid-like for the most part. But all right, well, that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it. Make sure to check out the other episodes if you haven't already, and I'll talk to you guys later.